She never expected her career to collapse in a single afternoon. Yet when the cheers of a graduation crowd faded into silence, all that remained was the sound of her own heart, steady and unbroken, as she held her daughter's hand in defiance of the world. Evelyn Carter had taught history for more than 30 years, weaving stories of resilience into classrooms that often dismissed her presence as a black woman. She had endured whispered slurs in the teacher's lounge, endured parents pulling their children from her classes because she was too political, endured administrators who told her to smile more, soften her tone, and not bring up slavery unless it was in the exact chapter of the textbook. But nothing had ever cut deeper than the moment the principal told her, with a smile too polite to be human, "You are suspended, effective immediately." The offense was not misconduct. It was not incompetence. It was love. She had dared to stand with her daughter, Maya, who, radiant in her cap and gown, had waved a rainbow flag as she crossed the stage. When Evelyn clasped her daughter's hand and raised it high, the gesture felt like history itself saluting the next generation. But the school board called it inappropriate political conduct. Evelyn knew better. It was fear disguised as order. Maya had grown up watching her mother fight invisible battles in a system built to erase her. The daughter of a black teacher in a predominantly white district, she had learned early to carry both pride and shame in unequal measures. Classmates mocked her hair, teachers mispronounced her name, and when she came out as gay at 16, the rejection multiplied. Yet her mother's kitchen table became a fortress. Evelyn's lessons didn't end when the school bell rang. "Baby," she would say, "history is not just what they print in books. It's what we dare to live." On graduation day, Evelyn thought it was just another lesson in courage. She did not expect the punishment to be so swift. Word spread across the school and into the community. Parents who had once praised her for tutoring their children in the evenings now wrote angry letters. Colleagues who used to sit beside her at lunch avoided eye contact. A few brave students stood up for her online, posting videos of her lessons, calling her the only teacher who ever made me believe I mattered. But the backlash drowned out the praise. Evelyn's suspension became a headline, "Teacher defies policy, sparks controversy." What they didn't understand was that Evelyn had always lived in controversy. To be a black woman teaching American history was itself an act of rebellion. To be a black mother supporting a gay daughter was a revolution. And revolutions don't stop at the order of a principal's letter. That night, sitting at her kitchen table with Maya, Evelyn's hands trembled for the first time. She had always been the strong one, the one who absorbed the pain so her daughter could stand taller. But the reality of losing her career, her income, her identity as Ms. Carter, the history teacher, pressed down like a weight on her chest. "Mama," Maya whispered, her voice cracking, "you taught me to fight. Let me fight with you." Evelyn looked at her daughter, at the rainbow flag folded neatly on the counter, at the wall lined with photos of students who had passed through her classroom. She realized something she had spent years teaching but never truly believed. Courage is contagious. The next morning, she wrote a letter. Not to the principal, not to the school board, to the public. In clear, sharp words, she told her story. How a lifetime of service was dismissed in a single act of love. How education without humanity is nothing but memorized facts. How a system that silences teachers silences students too. She sent it to the local paper. She expected it to be buried in the back pages. Instead, it spread. Within days, parents across the district argued at board meetings. Some demanded her reinstatement. Others shouted for her resignation. Students organized a walkout, holding signs that read, "Let her teach," and "Love is not inappropriate." The conflict grew beyond her small town. News outlets picked it up, framing Evelyn as either a hero or a radical. She was called brave. She was called dangerous. She was called unprofessional. For Evelyn, the truth was simpler. She was a mother who refused to let her daughter walk alone. And as the storm raged around her, something inside her began to shift. For the first time in years, she stopped worrying about pleasing the system. She stopped censoring herself in classrooms. She stopped apologizing for existing in spaces that wanted her silent. She began to imagine a different kind of education, not in the shadow of policy, but in the light of truth. Evelyn had always believed that silence was a kind of survival. Growing up in Mississippi during the tail end of Jim Crow, she had watched her parents bow their heads in grocery stores when white men passed, had seen her mother avoid confrontation even when a cashier shortchanged her on purpose. "Pick your battles," her father used to say, which often meant picking none at all. But Evelyn had chosen differently. Teaching had been her rebellion, her way of carving out space in a world that never wanted to hand her one. Now, with her job gone and her name whispered like a curse in town meetings, she wondered if she had been foolish all along. Foolish to think the classroom was hers. Foolish to believe that the school walls could contain both history and truth. Foolish to think that love could be public without consequence. The suspension letter still lay on the counter. Maya had tried to throw it out, but Evelyn had stopped her. "Don't," she had said quietly. "We need to keep it, so we remember exactly what we're fighting." Because a fight had begun, whether Evelyn wanted it or not. The letter she'd written to the newspaper traveled further than she could have imagined. A former student, now studying journalism, shared it on social media. Within hours it spread across the state, then across the country. Reporters began calling her house. Activist groups sent emails offering support. Some were clumsy, using her name as a banner for their causes without ever asking if she wanted to be a symbol, but others felt genuine. A local LGBTQ+ youth center invited her and Maya to speak. A civil rights attorney left a message on her voicemail, offering pro bono representation. Maya, who had spent her teenage years shrinking under the weight of mockery and rejection, suddenly became a lightning rod of hope. Strangers sent her letters. "I wish my mom had stood with me the way yours stood with you." Evelyn saw her daughter glow in ways she hadn't before, pride uncoiling in her shoulders, her laughter louder and freer. Yet beneath that pride, Evelyn caught glimpses of fear. The death threats slid into her inbox alongside the words of encouragement. "You people ruin everything. God will punish you. I hope your daughter learns the hard way." Evelyn deleted them quickly, not wanting Maya to see, but she could feel the poison soaking into her own veins. The town itself split in two. Parents gathered outside the school waving signs. Some read, "Protect our kids from politics." Others said, "Love is a lesson." Colleagues whispered behind closed doors. One teacher, Mrs. Henderson from English, called Evelyn late one night. "I'm proud of you," she said in a trembling voice, "but I can't say that publicly. I need my job." Evelyn understood. Not everyone could afford to be a martyr. But what she couldn't accept was the silence of Principal Roberts. He had always smiled at her in staff meetings, always complimented her lesson plans. He had told her once that she was the heart of the history department. Yet when the board suspended her, he didn't fight. He didn't even look her in the eye. For Evelyn, that betrayal cut deeper than the jeers of strangers. 1 week after the graduation, the school board held a public hearing. Evelyn hadn't planned to go, but Maya insisted. "If you don't show up, they'll tell the story without you," she said. The auditorium was packed. Reporters lined the walls, cameras flashing. At the front, the board members sat in a row, stern-faced and defensive. When her name was called, Evelyn rose slowly, her hands steady even though her heart pounded. She walked to the microphone and felt the weight of 100 eyes. "I've been a teacher for over 30 years, she began, her voice strong. "I've taught your children, your grandchildren. I've stayed after hours. I've bought supplies with my own money. I've written letters of recommendation that opened doors for students who thought they had none. I did this not because it was easy, but because I believed education was the path to freedom." She paused, scanning the faces before her. Some nodded, others frowned. "And yet, for all that, you've decided I am unfit. Not because I harmed a student, not because I failed in my duties, but because I held my daughter's hand." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's chest tightened, but she pressed on. "You tell students every day to be themselves, to work hard, to be proud. But when one of them is my daughter black, gay, media call it inappropriate. Tell me, what exactly are you teaching them then? That love is a crime? That pride should be punished? That teachers must check their humanity at the classroom door? Her voice cracked now, anger sharpening every word. If that is what you want education to be, then maybe I never belonged here at all. The crowd erupted. Some applauded, others booed. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn stepped back, heart racing, and for the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. She had said the thing they had tried to silence. She had spoken truth aloud, and no one could take it back. After the hearing, the story exploded. News anchors debated her case on national television. Conservative pundits called her a danger to children. Activists called her a hero. Offers began arriving, universities asking her to guest lecture, organizations inviting her to speak at conferences. Evelyn didn't know what to make of it. She had never asked to be a public figure. She only wanted to teach. But Maya looked at her with shining eyes. Mama, you always told me history isn't just in books. Maybe this is our history. Maybe this is what you were meant to teach. Evelyn thought about that for a long time. Days turned into weeks. The board postponed their decision on whether to fire her permanently. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Maya traveled to the city to speak at the youth center. The room was filled with kids, queer, trans, kids of color, many of them staring at the ground, afraid to meet her eyes. Evelyn told them about her classroom, about how she tried to make history more than dates and wars. She told them how every student who dared to live truthfully was part of that same history. Slowly, the kids looked up. Some smiled, some cried. Maya sat beside her, holding her hand the whole time. On the drive home, Evelyn realized something that startled her. She didn't miss the school building as much as she thought she would. What she missed were the students, the chance to pour truth into young minds. And she could still do that, maybe even more freely now. But the fight wasn't over. The threats grew uglier. One evening, as they returned from the grocery store, Evelyn found a note taped to her door. Stop before it's too late. She tore it down before Maya could see, but her hands shook so badly she dropped the keys. Fear was real. Danger was real. Yet so was resolve. For every hateful letter, 10 more arrived filled with gratitude. Former students wrote to say she had changed their lives. Parents from other towns begged her to come teach their children. A gay teacher from Texas sent an email saying, "Because of you, I came out to my staff today." Evelyn realized she was no longer just a teacher. She had become a lesson herself. The summer sun hung heavy over the small town, pressing its heat into sidewalks and porches. But inside Evelyn Carter's home, the air was thick with something far more suffocating than July humidity. Tension had become a house guest, uninvited yet ever present. Every ring of the phone sent a jolt of fear through her chest. Every car that slowed in front of her house made her wonder if tonight was the night anger would turn into something worse. Yet even in that fear, Evelyn found herself moving forward. Invitations to speak at schools and community groups poured in. Some were small church basements, libraries, youth centers. Others were large conferences, rallies, even a request from a university panel on educational equity. Evelyn had never considered herself a public speaker. She was a teacher used to chalkboards and whispered questions in the back row, not microphones and cameras. But when she stepped up to each podium, her voice carried with a steadiness that surprised even her. She realized the years of teaching had prepared her for this stage. She had always been telling stories that mattered. Now the audience was simply larger. Maya stood beside her at many of these events, sometimes nervous, sometimes bold. She was still adjusting to being seen, really seen for who she was. No more hiding. No more softening her voice or tucking away her rainbow bracelets when she walked into school. The daughter who once dreaded crowded hallways now faced cameras with a trembling smile. And when she spoke about bullying, about fear, about pride, the silence in the rooms that followed told her the truth. Her voice mattered. But the town they lived in had not softened. If anything, the lines grew sharper. The local church held a sermon calling Evelyn's actions a betrayal of Christian values. Flyers appeared on telephone poles urging the school board to Protect our children from radical agendas. A group of parents organized a petition to permanently revoke her license. One night, while Evelyn and Maya were returning from a speaking engagement, they pulled into their driveway and saw their garage door spray-painted in thick black letters. "Unfit. Go away." Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Evelyn's stomach dropped, but she forced her face into calmness for her daughter's sake. She guided her inside, called the police, and later scrubbed at the paint herself until her arms ached. The words didn't disappear fully, only smeared into gray shadows. For days afterward, every time she glanced at that garage, she saw the mark of a community trying to erase her. But just as the hate grew louder, so did the love. Former students traveled back from college just to stand outside the school with signs that read, "Carter taught me to think." Parents from neighboring districts wrote letters demanding her reinstatement. An online fundraiser to support her legal fees surpassed its goal in a matter of days. Evelyn found herself standing in a storm of two Americas, one trying to silence her, one urging her forward. The conflict reached its peak when the school board finally announced a final vote on her employment. The auditorium overflowed with people supporters, opponents, reporters, even strangers who had driven in from other towns just to witness the decision. Evelyn sat in the front row with Maya beside her, heart hammering so hard she thought it might betray her calm exterior. The board chair cleared his throat, shuffling papers like a man trying to delay the inevitable. "The matter before us," he began, "concerns whether Ms. Evelyn Carter's actions at the graduation ceremony constitute grounds for termination of employment." His words were formal, dry, but the air bristled with electricity. Before the vote, the floor opened for community comments. One by one, people stepped forward. A father of three declared Evelyn had shoved politics down our children's throats. A woman in the second row stood up and shouted, "She showed our kids what love looks like." Applause erupted, then boos. The board tried to gavel the room into silence, but the passion could not be contained. Finally, a tall young man approached the microphone. His voice shook as he introduced himself. "My name is David Johnson. Miss Carter was my teacher 10 years ago." He paused, glancing back at Evelyn. His eyes glistened. "I was a quiet kid, scared, confused. She was the first adult who ever told me it was okay to be myself. Without her, I don't know if I'd still be here today." He swallowed hard. "If you fire her, you're not protecting children. You're killing their hope." The room fell into stunned silence. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, but she held them back. She would not break here. When the board finally voted, the decision split evenly, 3 for termination, 3 against. The tie meant the matter was postponed again, pending further review. It was not a victory, but it was not defeat. And in that suspended moment, Evelyn understood something. The board could keep her in limbo, but the community had already made its choice. Afterward, as they walked to their car through the swarm of cameras and flashing lights, Maya squeezed her mother's hand. "No matter what they decide, you've already won," she whispered. Evelyn looked at her daughter, the strong, luminous young woman who had once been so afraid to exist, and realized she was right. The days that followed were a blur. Requests for interviews flooded in. Civil rights groups called her a modern Rosa Parks of education. Critics called her a cautionary tale. Evelyn ignored most of it, focusing instead on the faces of the young people who came up to her after events, thanking her for making them feel seen. Those moments mattered more than headlines. Still, the weight of uncertainty lingered. Bills stacked up without her paycheck. Fear whispered in the corners of her home. And sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, Evelyn wondered if she had sacrificed too much. What if this fight swallowed her whole? What if she had failed Maya by dragging her into a storm she never asked for? One evening, Maya found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the unpaid bills. She sat down, took Evelyn's hands, and said softly, "Mama, you've given me everything. Your love, your strength, your belief. Even if we lose everything else, we still have that. And that's enough." Evelyn broke then, tears spilling freely. For so long she had been the protector, the shield. But in that moment, she realized her daughter had become her strength too. And that was when the idea came. Instead of waiting for the board's decision, instead of hoping for the system to change on its own, what if she built something new? What if she created a space where students who felt invisible could finally belong? Not a school bound by fear, but one grounded in truth, dignity, and love. The thought terrified her. It seemed impossible, but every great change once did. She began making calls. To former students, to activists, to anyone who had reached out offering help. The response shocked her. Donations poured in. Volunteers offered their time. A local church, sympathetic to her cause, offered its basement as a temporary classroom. Within weeks, the Carter Freedom Academy was born, not an official school yet, but a movement. On the first day, only 12 students showed up. Some were kids who had dropped out, others who felt unsafe in traditional schools, a few who simply wanted to learn history from a woman unafraid to tell it truthfully. Evelyn looked at their faces: black, brown, queer, trans, poor, each carrying their own scars, and felt something stir in her chest. This was why she had fought. Not for a paycheck, not for prestige, but for them. As she stood in front of that small class, sunlight filtering through stained glass windows, Evelyn smiled. "Welcome," she said. "Today, we make history together." The first weeks of the Carter Freedom Academy were chaotic but full of a kind of joy Evelyn had never known in a traditional classroom. There were no bells dictating the pace, no rigid curriculum forced upon her, no administrators watching for missteps. Instead, there was laughter, raw honesty, and students who walked in carrying pieces of themselves that had long been hidden. Some days were messy. Supplies were scarce. The basement grew too hot in the afternoons, and the sound of choir practice upstairs often drowned out her lessons. Yet the students came back, day after day, hungry for something deeper than textbooks could offer. Evelyn taught them history as it was meant to be told: ugly, painful, triumphant, unfinished. She spoke about Harriet Tubman as more than a name in a chapter, about James Baldwin as more than a quote on a poster, about Bayard Rustin as a man who had been erased for being both black and gay. And she spoke about her own life, too, about choosing courage over silence, about the cost of loving openly. Maya, to Evelyn's surprise, became her partner in teaching. She led discussions about identity, about the challenges of coming out in a world that often refused to listen. The students adored her. One afternoon, a shy girl whispered, "You're the first person who makes me think maybe I can be okay." Maya blinked back tears and smiled. For the first time in her young life, she was more than a survivor. She was a role model. But success came with pressure. Reporters kept calling, demanding to know if the academy was legal. Critics sneered that it was just indoctrination in disguise. And the school board, unwilling to release its grip, announced that Evelyn's official termination hearing would proceed, citing abandonment of contract. The threat loomed over everything. Still, Evelyn pressed forward. Each day in that basement became proof that education was not about policies or politics, it was about human connection. Yet she could not ignore the fear that the board would shut her down permanently, or worse, drag her name through the mud until no one would dare send their children to her. The final hearing arrived like a storm. By now, the Carter Freedom Academy had grown to nearly 30 students, and dozens more wanted to join. The community buzzed with talk of it. Supporters rallied, critics fumed, and the auditorium overflowed once again. Evelyn, dressed in her navy blue dress, walked to the microphone with Maya beside her. She did not bring notes. She had no script. She had only truth. "For months," she began, "you have tried to silence me. You suspended me for holding my daughter's hand. You told me love was inappropriate. You told me I no longer belonged in a classroom. And maybe you were right, because the classroom I built with you was too small for the truth." She paused, scanning the room. "So I built another one. A classroom without walls, where students are free to learn, to question, to exist. That's what education should be. Not fear. Not shame. Not silence. Truth." Her voice grew steadier. "If you fire me today, know this: You cannot fire courage. You cannot fire love. And you cannot fire the future these young people are building. The auditorium erupted cheers, shouts, boos, applause. The board members whispered among themselves, faces pale. They voted quickly, and the result was clear: termination. Evelyn Carter was officially no longer a teacher in their system. But as she left the stage, surrounded by students chanting her name, Evelyn realized something profound. They had not ended her career. They had simply freed her from their chains. In the weeks that followed, the Carter Freedom Academy became more than a basement classroom. Donations poured in, enough to rent a permanent space. Volunteer teachers signed on, eager to be part of something new. Lawyers helped her secure nonprofit status. Slowly, a dream solidified. A school rooted in justice, where every child, black, brown, queer, or otherwise, could learn without fear. Evelyn often sat in the new space, sunlight streaming through tall windows, and marveled at what had grown from pain. The walls bore murals painted by students. A rainbow bursting through dark clouds, Harriet Tubman reaching out her hand, Maya standing tall with her graduation cap and flag. The air was alive with laughter, debate, music. It was imperfect, sometimes overwhelming, but it was alive. And in those moments, Evelyn thought back to the graduation stage, to the moment when she held Maya's hand high and the world turned against her. That was the moment that had ended one life and begun another. Late one evening, as the last students left, Evelyn and Maya sat together in the empty classroom. The air smelled faintly of paint and chalk. Maya leaned against her mother's shoulder. "Mama," she whispered, "do you ever regret it? Holding my hand that day?" Evelyn turned to her, eyes soft. "Not for 1 second. If I had to lose everything just to show you that love is never shameful, I'd do it again 1,000 times." Maya closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, and for a moment the silence between them was not heavy but holy. Outside, the world still roared with division. Prejudice did not vanish. Hate did not disappear. But Evelyn knew something had shifted. She had planted a seed, and seeds grow quietly, stubbornly, even in hostile soil. Perhaps one day the Carter Freedom Academy would be just a footnote in history, or perhaps it would ignite something larger, something unstoppable. Either way, Evelyn was at peace. She had chosen love over fear, truth over silence. And in doing so, she had taught her greatest lesson not from a textbook, not from behind a desk, but from the very core of her life. As she turned off the classroom lights, Evelyn whispered to the empty room, as if to every student past and future, "The real lesson is this: courage is the curriculum, and love is the answer." And somewhere deep inside, she knew the world was listening. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.